With me now to talk about that are two former ambassadors who served during Donald Trump's first term. Former U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Kelly Craft, is here, as is former Canadian Ambassador to the U.S., David MacNaughton. Hello to both of you. It's a great pleasure to see you together again on our airwaves. I appreciate you making the time. Mr. MacNaughton, I will start with you, just sort of on the stakes as you see them of this meeting, given how little movement there has been really over the past few months and how much we know is at stake for Canada in this trading relationship. How much of a risk do you think this meeting is?
Well, look, I think it's always useful and important for the Prime Minister to get together with the President. I think we should be realistic about what the outcome is going to be, although you never know. The President may, he can come up with ideas about deals faster than almost anybody, so you never know. But I think it's worthwhile for the two of them to get together. I know they've been in touch, but I think we should, have a realistic expectation about what the outcome's going to be. I think it's going to take time. Ambassador
Craft, I wanted to ask you, as someone who does know Mr. Trump, President Trump, very well, how important the face-to-face meetings are, the in-person meetings are. I've heard other politicians talk about sort of getting more done in those than via phone or otherwise. Is that the case as you know it?
Absolutely. I think this is Prime Minister Carney's third meeting with President Trump. And, as he was in his last meeting, he was prepared. And I think that's very important, to always be prepared and to come with a package and to be open-minded. And I think this particular meeting, the burden is on Carney. And I think if you're going to talk about whether it's USMCA or tariffs, he really, I hope, has taken the time to look very carefully at the trade agreements between Japan, Indonesia, the EU, Vietnam, the UK, other countries, and see what have they done? What have they done to prepare? What have they done? What concessions have they made? And how has this been a successful outcome for them and, of course, for the United States?
What's interesting about those agreements, Mr. MacNaughton, is that all those countries came to a deal with the president by agreeing to maintain some sort of base level of tariffs. We are in the position where the free trade agreement that both of you know so well was renegotiated during the first term has covered the bulk of our trade and remains in place for that. There's obviously a review that's about to get started and kind of formally has already kicked off. But there are very punishing sectoral tariffs that are in place right now on steel and aluminum, additional ones on forestry, for example, and the auto sector. Mr. MacNaughton, in your view, is the goal for the Carney government to see those reduced, given that CUSMA is still in place to cover the bulk of the rest?
Yeah, I think so. But I think realistically, if you look at, those tariffs are being imposed under Section 232, which says that imports of steel, aluminum, and I guess lumber also are a national security threat to the United States. I think that in order to deal with that, we need to actually have a serious discussion with the President about defense and security, not just about military spending, although that's really important, but also about things like critical minerals, which Canada has lots of. And I know the United States has been exploring taking positions in companies that have got critical minerals. We need to find a way to get our critical minerals to market and hopefully to the United States as quickly as possible. But there's lots to be discussed around defense and security. And I think the quid pro quo for, a meaningful and quick uptick in our spending with the Americans and defense spending is to have the 232 tariffs either removed or substantially reduced. You can't as a Canadian say, okay, we're going to spend a heck of a lot. We're going to spend billions more on defense, a lot of it with American companies, and still have, the Americans saying we're a national security threat. That doesn't add up. So I think there's a lot to be discussed there. And that's where I think the discussion should focus.
It reminds me, Ambassador Kraft, of comments you made actually the last time the three of us were on the program together. I think it was the day after the U.S. election, or in and around that week at least, where you pretty much explicitly tied, I think it was, our relationship really with the president to defense in general, but also defense spending. You said, I can assure you, you'll have no better friend than Donald Trump if you carry your weight. On the defense spending portion of that, certainly there have been meaningful increases or promises of them. We're now going to hit 2% this year, for example. We're waiting for the budget a month from now, but an extra $9 billion has been promised. They've articulated a goal of 5% by 2035, which is a big difference from when we had that conversation back in November. Do you anticipate that does provide for a different discussion tomorrow with the president, and your take on what Mr. MacNaughton laid out around Section 232 tariffs in response?
I think it's important to understand that when we have talked about tariffs, we have set, the three different areas from which we are looking at to raise revenue, to encourage our trading partners to give concessions, and to also have a trade agreement, and as a national security interest for the United States. And the president is looking at all three of those, and that's very important. And if you look at the world, I mean, they set their hair on fire when we started initiating these tariffs. The sky didn't fall. Actually, what happened were countries were like NATO, our defense spending increased. The EU, if you look at the other countries that have come to the table that I mentioned in the beginning, I think that's important to see that nothing happened negative to these countries. Actually, it has encouraged them, it has strengthened them, and that it has given them respect with the president. And I think that's really important. And Prime Minister Carney, I am certain, understands that he has to come prepared, and he understands that, retaliatory tariffs are not the way. You certainly cannot try to compete with President Trump because you'll lose. So if you look at the other countries, look at how they have managed their trade deals, and to see what the barriers are, whether it's NATO, whether it's the Prime Minister being the first G7 country to recognize Palestinian state. I mean, here we are right in the middle of an agreed Middle East peace plan. I mean, he has rallied the world around this 20-point plan. And to see that Canada is recognizing the Palestinian state, I mean, that to me looks like it's an undermining President Trump's objectives. And tomorrow is the second-year anniversary. And if you also look at what's happening at the University of Toronto, having a rally from the martyrs, I mean, I think Prime Minister Carney recognizing the Palestinian state may have also initiated in giving more permission to students and to protest in Canada. So I think that's an area that you need to closely examine. And I'm certain, I don't know what will be brought up in tomorrow's meeting, but I am certain that President Trump is going to be looking at areas such as that would be a barrier to having a fair trade agreement.
Mr. MacNaughton, I know there's a lot in there to respond to, and I know the Canadian position would differ from what we heard from Ambassador Kraft, but I think it does point to something that has certainly stuck out to me since President Trump's election, which is the degree to which countries have maybe agreed to things that you wouldn't have anticipated they would to, like a base level of tariffs in order to get some kind of agreement. The degree to which he has not been pushed off of the trade agenda or the tariff agenda that the president has put forward, and that largely what he said they would do for federal coffers, they have done without the massive impacts on the economy that had been predicted, at least not yet. What does that do to the Canadian negotiating position in your view, and how should it inform what the Prime Minister brings to tomorrow's meeting?
Well, look, I think it's important to realize that we have a fair trade agreement. In fact, what we've got is a trade agreement that this President Trump, said was the best trade deal that the United States had ever done. So, let's realize that exists. It's important. It's under review, and we'll have discussions about that. I should also add that, Kelly's talking about, retaliatory tariffs. The other reality is that when the United States put tariffs on Chinese electric vehicle imports, we matched them. And as a result of matching them, the Chinese put huge tariffs on our canola and other products out of Saskatchewan that has caused unbelievable harm and damage. So, you know, this isn't a one-way street. It's a two-way street. There needs to be some dialogue. I understand the the issue about the recognition of the Palestinian state. I should add, however, that when President Trump was able to pull that deal together, that Prime Minister Carney was effusive in his praise of what President Trump had done. But I go back to, these tariffs on steel and aluminum are being imposed under 232, which says that it's a national security threat to the United States. I don't believe that. And I believe that what we need to do is to have a dialogue about how we can, and Kelly's right, I mean, we have not been pulling our weight, and we need to do more. And we need to do it quickly. It's not promises in 10 years, it's action now. And in the event that we do that, and if we do it, satisfactorily, and there's lots of things, for instance, there's chromite in the Ring of Fire that can help the United States do more stainless steel. So that's hardly a national security threat to the United States of America. So, look, I think there's lots of dialogue to be had. I think there's things that we need to put on the table that we haven't been good about in the past. But, in terms of a fair trade deal, we got one. Kelly and I worked hard on it. And as I say, the president said it was the best trade deal ever been done by the United States. So we'll have some discussions over the next 7 or 8 months about whether or not every one of the parties is living up to what they committed to under the trade deal that we negotiated, and there are legitimate views on that. But I think there's lots of room for dialogue and discussion, and I think Canada's relationship with the United States is far different than Germany or Poland or the Netherlands. We share this continent together. We're in a two-way defense deal called NORAD. So I think there's lots to be discussed, and I think there's lots of common ground that can be found if people are prepared to be open-minded and reasonable.
I'll leave it on that note. My thanks to both Ambassador Kraft and Ambassador MacNaughton.